In the Emerald Isle, something unexplainable is happening. Tonight, prepare to witness the most frightening event in horror podcast history. A journey into the depths of horror history. First Class Horror presents the Class Horror Cast. Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.
Bobby Rowe is an actor, director and screenwriter most famously known for his films The Houses October Built 1 and 2. He has also written a children's book, Narah and the Unicorn. During my conversation we talk about his love for horror, the haunt industry, the long-awaited sequels to The Houses October Built, following your passion and his upcoming projects such as A Wicked Tale. Bobby has an extremely vast knowledge of the industry and I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I did. Okay, so I suppose the first question that I always try and ask everybody is kind of maybe a little bit of an unorthodox question. What scared you as a kid, or like what's your first memories of something scaring you as you were growing up?
Sure, I actually remember that quite vividly. I probably till I was about 11 or 12 years old wouldn't sleep on my back, because I thought that's how Freddy Krueger got you. Nice. Because all I knew was the poster from Nightmare on Elm Street with Nancy on the bed and then, the knife fingers going over her face. I was intrigued. I wanted to really see it. My mom obviously wouldn't let me. And so all I had was that poster in my head. And then so my imagination kind of went wild and, tried to make up my own story for it. And so for the longest time, that was one of those things, because, that's the ingenious part of Nightmare on Elm Street, is that I always think it's fun to take something as, universal as sleep, right? Something that no one can avoid. Mm-hmm. And therefore you can think about a horror movie or project will be in your head every single day because everybody has to sleep. And that was just so smart that Wes Craven did. But it worked inadvertently on a, 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid. When I would see the ads on TV, I thought, oh, this is going to be amazing. I really want to see this. When I couldn't do that, I made up my own movie in my head and it scared the shit out of me for the next 7 years.
Do you think in modern day, we've kind of lost that, because even I have like a kind of vivid memories of being in like the video store and sure. Maybe not being allowed to see certain movies, and kind of exactly what you said. You kind of come up with your own version of what you think that movie might be based off the artwork.
Yes, I think there's a great documentary called Electric Boogaloo about the, I think it's the Canon guys or Corelco. I think Canon. Anyway, they talked about, especially in the 80s and 90s, you could go sell a movie that had no script, hasn't been shot at Cannes with just a poster, because we lived in a world where we just perused the Blockbuster aisle and you rented something based on its artwork, which I love. And, there's a couple, old horror movies that probably still scarred me because I remember seeing them. I remember even avoiding a couple of them in the aisles because they would stick with you, and they were pretty graphic, especially for back then. I think in talks of artwork, I think Netflix does a really smart job. It pisses people off at the same time, but it's smart from a business standpoint, is they switch out that artwork all the time. So you may catch yourself watching something on Netflix again going, wait, I've already seen this, but just flipping out that artwork makes it feel fresh. And I think that's really smart on what they do.
Yeah. Like, I suppose it's just the evolution of it, really. But like, so many people I talk to, and including myself, like, I could never quite put it into words, but just when you said it there about the fact that like you kind of would do that if you weren't allowed to see the movie, you would, or somebody would tell you who had seen it apparently, and then you would kind of fill in the gaps in your mind. Yeah, it's kind of strange that that's all kind of disappeared in a way or evolved. So that kind of ties into my next question, which would be like, what were some of your favorite horrors, or was there one that, you know, got you into maybe the genre or whatever?
Sure. It got me into it was more, so I've always tried to, cerebral's the wrong word, but I like the more elevated horror concepts, right? Where it's probably why I gravitated more to Freddie over Jason, because Jason was just, you know, it's a slasher at the end of the day and there's not a lot of depth to it. But you know, when Saw came out, I actually got to see it about a year early. A friend of mine was at Lionsgate, and I came home from bars one night, and there was a VHS sitting at my front door, I swear. And nice. I didn't know what it was. And we'd had this relationship before where she was asking my opinion or notes and stuff like that. So I put it in, not knowing what it was, me and a buddy, and we just watched it that night. And I remember at 4 a.m, we were like, we got to play it again. And we watched it 2 times in a row, 6 a.m. And I was like, wow, to me, that was, you could call it torture porn at the time, but it wasn't. It was so much more than that. And Juan and Winnell were able to create a movie that was, can probably be seen on 2 different levels. To some people from the outside, Saw is just torture porn. But that script, I mean, that first one is so smart, and that reveal works so well. That helped me realize that horror can be something else that you can be really proud of on different levels. Because I think if you ask our parents about horror and stuff, they just think it's, Jason and Michael Myers, and they just kind of equate it to that. And I think that horror can really speak and say something at the same time as well. So I think Saw opened my eyes to showing both sides of that coin, which I really enjoyed and have kind of tried to aim for that in some form ever since. And
have you, I assume you're still a huge horror guy. So
yep, Halloween has meant so much to me. Horror's meant so much to me. And so I do. I love it. It's a great escape, especially during all this time. Yeah. Crazy time.
Do you have any favorites, like as regards subgenres or anything like that?
Let's see. Like lately I've tried to catch up, and I think more of the last couple years we've been so busy. I haven't had a chance to catch up to everything, so I've been doing my best kind of through quarantine to do that. I really liked lately Train to Busan. Mm-hmm. Was a fun kind of just a little bit of a spin on, a Dawn of the Dead with the fast zombies. The zombies move differently. I really enjoyed that. But the movie that blew me away that I've watched this year is as low budget as it gets, but One Cut of the Dead on Shudder. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's superb.
Yeah, it's so
and it's so smart. And when anybody says the well is dry, it is not. And it's one, like, it's very rare that I like force movies on people, but I made Zach, I was like, stick through this. There's a lot of people that I've just sat down and made them watch it. Because it's such a great reveal. It's such a great idea. And, I really appreciate it coming from a low budget side of it as well. But what they pulled off, the continuous shot, what people don't realize also is with a small budget, it's not just about money. That money buys you time. And that's probably one of the most important things in movies that people don't really understand and realize is that that extra time is what helps you so much, even more than the money, but the money buys the time. So for them to pull off, I calculated it at about 39-minute one shot is phenomenal in so much blocking and rehearsal. And so what they did, I just highly recommend it to people I tell everybody to just press play. Cause I don't really want to get into any kind of spoilers with that, because it was such a fun find for me to have that nobody recommended it to me. I just decided through streaming roulette to play it. And I was very, very, happy that I did.
Yeah. I've talked to a couple of people who actually recommended it to me a while back, and said basically what you just said. And just that the payoff was worth it. Just hit play and just kind of let it do its thing.
Sure. Have you seen the numbers on it? Do you know what the record they broke?
No.
So this is pretty cool. They, the budget was $25,000 US, and it made 31 million worldwide. So it's the first movie in history to ever make 1,000 times its budget.
Wow. That's crazy.
And what's crazy is it never even came out in the US. So, I mean, it could have done more business as well. So that was a fascinating fact to kind of, to find on such a hidden gem isn't even the right word for it. I don't know what it is, but man, did I love that movie. Yeah.
Cause it kind of came out under the radar in a way. And I had heard people mention it on Reddit and different places, but I didn't really, there wasn't this huge boom or anything. And normally, like a movie like that, I don't know if you've seen the quarantine movie that came out this year called Host.
I did. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and like that whole thing, I guess they kind of cashed in on the kind of, everybody's stuck at home or whatever. And it was just, I guess, I'm not taking anything away from the guys, but it was kind of the right place, the right time, and everything kind of aligned.
Sure.
And it seems like with One Cut, it just kind of came out, and like I said, I had heard it mentioned a few times, but not really. It's crazy to hear that it's made over 31 million.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
I mean, it blew my mind. But good for them. They really found, they were able to combine so many things, like a continuous shot mixed with found footage, mixed with the most meta thing I've ever seen. Like it's super cool. So I can't recommend that more.
So if you could make any movie within an existing horror franchise, obviously other than your own, which would it be and why?
So that's a great question. It's funny how that's kind of evolved. In some ways now, having kids, I want, and it was announced last week, but for years, I thought there was room for a Hocus Pocus 2. And that's not just it was more about traditional Halloween stuff, which it's just kind of fascinating how that movie was, that movie lost 17 million when it came out, and God knows how much it's made since then. Yeah. And, something like that was really interesting from a family perspective, because I try to walk that line. I hope my head can go to the most messed up thing you've ever thought of, and then on top of it, have something that was family friendly. Like I'd love to be able to walk that line. But from a real horror perspective, I would love to make to continue a Nightmare on Elm Street. Because, which is probably an obvious, boring answer, but what I felt like the remake did so poorly is, how do you not incorporate dreams the right way? Like, there was nothing fantastical. There was nothing fun. And to completely subtract the whole dream sequences from that movie is probably its biggest downfall. And so it's very hard to capture lightning in a bottle again. I think you'd have to take a different angle with it. But I would love to see that come back to life the right way. Cause those were always fun. They're endless. I mean, you really can. You can just go for so long on there. And I appreciate when, let's say that the series kind of went stale, when Craven tried a new Nightmare, that was kind of the first time I'd seen something. I don't even know if the word people used meta back then, but that was just such a breath of fresh air in something like a Jason series that wasn't really trying anything new. I mean, I guess they put them in space, but trying something like that is really fun. So I think that I would try to approach it at a different angle, because you don't want to be compared to the first. You don't want a shot for shot remake. That doesn't really work. Or at least maybe it could work box office wise, but people aren't going to remember it. It's just going to go away. Van Sant tried it with Psycho, but a shot for shot is just a novelty. I think you need to take a different angle. Would you
try and cast Freddie as Robert Englund, or would you completely
That's
recast?
A great question too. I still think he has some gas in the tank.
Me too.
And so I'd love to do it, because he brings something to that role that is very hard. Like Jackie Earle Haley is a great actor, and he did what he could with that. But the campiness is probably a lot of Freddie that we like. So when it's taken too seriously, maybe that's another part of the problem of that movie. But yeah, I'd let Englund go till he can't go anymore. I mean, I really would, because especially the benefit of a role like that is with the scar makeup, and hell, we can de-age people if we have to now with an app. So, but with him, he would look the exact same as he did in 1984 right now, because of you have that rare case of the prosthetics being put on. So yeah, I would definitely let him keep going. And I really hope we see that. It's just a shame that Craven's not around to continue it.
Yeah, it kind of sucks now that Friday the 13th is kind of in a deadlock, and Nightmare on Elm Street is kind of fizzled out. It seems like Halloween is, although Texas Chainsaw just got announced, didn't it? So it'll be interesting to see where they take that.
Yeah, and look, it's always fun. I'm always looking for the next iconic, there's no reason that, those were great for us in the 80s or 90s. We need that kind of reinvigorated with our own, new era twist. I don't think it has to be the classic guys, so hopefully there can be a resurgence in that as well. Cause I do think the 80s is coming back rather strongly in the next couple of years. So we'll see what that gives us.
Another thing I wanted to ask about, probably an obvious question in a way. So obviously the haunt scene and the haunted attraction scene in the States is huge. Here in Ireland and in Europe, it's kind of starting to get a little bit bigger. In Ireland, not so much. We have like one or two like big haunts, and then the rest are kind of just people in their backyards kind of thing. Were you always a haunt guy or into that kind of stuff, or when did that start to become a thing?
Yeah, I think haunted houses probably before horror movies, because that's what I was allowed to do. Even my elementary school, we all every year put on a haunted house. Obviously, it was kid friendly, but it was cool to incorporate everyone's costumes, and so that was almost a gateway to horror films. But that was something also that really triggered Zach and I in probably about 2008. So we were putting together Houses October Built before Paranormal Activity even came out. So the found footage resurgence, we were happy for it, but we were also like, you probably needed some box office juggernaut like Paranormal to create the style again, or at least having it be in the public eye for people to accept it, the POV type of look. But that was something that we really would. We'd go on these meetings, and so many people didn't know what we were talking about. They just always thought the word haunted house meant a place that an old abandoned castle with a ghost. And so it was very hard to convince executives that there's this whole scene, and especially in middle America, that it's 6,000-7,000 people a night making hand over fist. I mean, that was Halloween to people, not just on the 31st. It was every single night of October. And we grew up that way. Zach and I really would. We'd go as far back as high school, and we would go to these haunts and go see a horror movie every weekend of October. So it's been a big part of our life, and that was something important to us to put on the big screen, because as far as we knew, nobody had ever done that. And we found that strange because, you know, I think the numbers at the time were 35 million people a year go to haunted houses. And so we just thought this is the perfect place to tell a story we wanted to tell around this amazing macabre world.
Yeah, like it, and it's funny because I think until you guys kind of, blazed that trail, I don't think, well, obviously nobody had thought of it, but like just, it's such a huge industry. Like even I and a lot of people I know travel for, you know, things like Halloween Horror Nights from all over the world. And now that's kind of taken another step where people will travel and maybe do one of those big universal haunts and then kind of try and make a road trip out of it, similar to what we'll get into in a little bit. But like, it's such a huge business, and I think there's so much potential there for a lot of cool stuff to be done in movies and in the haunt industry as well. Yeah,
and I think the Ma and Pa ones tend to be my favorite because, you know, I still go to Universal Horror Nights and Not Scary Farm, and I enjoy that, but the innovation that comes with the smaller ones is pretty incredible.
Yeah. So that kind of segues into, I guess, another maybe obvious question. So if you had to pick, I don't know if you can remember off the top of your head, you've probably done so many. What would you say is some of the scariest haunts that you've ever experienced?
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and it always feels like it's even a different answer each time because you just remember. I mean, probably gone to easily over 100 for just the filming of the 2-3 movies. So the best way to kind of answer it is never been one particular haunt. It's kind of been one particular scene or room in a haunt that kind of resonates with you after you leave. And to me, I'll tell you one quick story on it. We were tour for part 1, and, on our way through, we ended up in a place in New Mexico, and what we did was rather stupid because we didn't even follow our own fictional rules from the movie. We had to do a haunt. We did like a signing, and we went and talked to scare actors in Albuquerque. And then somebody told us of this off the grid haunt that we should go check out also while we're coming through. So we went and did it, like just like the characters in the movie, which was dumb. And we get to this place that was in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere. And the next thing you know, we had bags over our head, and there were shotguns against our backs. Like literally there was cold steel up my shirt on my back. And then they whispered, "We know who you are. You ain't seen shit yet." And we're like, oh man, this kind of got a little too weird. Because we didn't know what we had done. And at the time it was just me, Michael, and Zach. We were picking up Brandy the next day. Thankfully she was not with us. But my brother got blindfolded, kicked off this cliff that he described as 100 feet, ended up being about 20 feet into a foam pit. But when you're blinded, you know, you just keep falling. I got put into a box, and I'm a big dude, and they put me in a box, locked it, and there were holes in it, and I had warm liquid sprayed on me from every direction. And I think the idea was that it could be piss. And I got kicked down a hallway. It was impressive. And by separating us, we didn't see each other for another hour. We ended up talking to the manager. You know, it was a really good haunt. It wasn't that. It was just kind of the opening of it felt uncomfortable, which it probably should. But we found out they had 120 or 160 piss outs that year, meaning people literally pissed their pants and asked to leave. So, yeah, so that was a fun ride.
So just on the topic of that, or when you bring that up, I don't know if it's something that you want to talk about or have any thoughts on, but a lot of people reached out to me through Reddit and different places, and a lot of people wanted to ask your opinion on, or have you ever been through McCamey Manor?
So I've not gone through it. It's funny because I've talked to Russ as well. They came up to us at ScareCon in Los Angeles saying that they enjoyed the movie. And we had heard obviously about them, but back in 2000, I think it was 2010 or 11, we were going to shoot at McCamey because no one knew about it at the time. We had heard whispers of it and, the 20,000 person wait list and yada, yada. But what we realized is we can't shoot there because if we do, what the hell's our finale going to be?
Yeah.
Right. So it didn't fall into the narrative we wanted to do. And to be honest, at the end of the day, these movies have been a love letter to Halloween. And I think the haunt community is very divided in McCamey and through we'll call it the regular haunts. And so, that's kind of been tough. So we've stayed towards the traditional haunts, I guess, for those movies, because that's what makes more sense to us. Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. You can be traumatized for a bit, but I've heard that release says you can have your head shaved, and even if you're a girl. So
yeah, I've seen some of the videos.
Yeah, so that's bananas. So no, I've never done it.
Would you ever do it?
It's funny. I brought it up. I got sent the article by everybody about last year about the $20,000 if you make it through when he had it in Arizona. Because everybody's like, "There's no way you don't make it through that. As many as you've done." And so it's funny. I did debate it there and doing it as kind of a stunt, but we were so busy last year we couldn't do it.
Yeah, I guess. Like I've seen and looked into so much about McCamey itself that the lines have become so blurred now. I'm not sure whether Russ is extremely smart and has just managed to, I guess, in a way, cultivate this kind of this modern day rumor that can't be proved or disproved by the internet, or there's actually like some crazy stuff going on. And because even up until right now, I didn't realize that at least once a week, there's videos coming out about McCamey, different people who said they've been through, or they've heard this, or they've saw that, or the waiver says this, or it's just really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's funny because he's moved states. I've heard he's in Tennessee, then he's in Alabama. I don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah, because I think the most recent thing I had seen is he has apparently has two different locations. The one in Tennessee, I think he talks about, but the one in Alabama, I think anytime anybody brings it up, he just doesn't want to get into it. Again, it's interesting. It's interesting. I've looked up a lot of stuff about it. At one point, I was like, you know what? That seems not easy, but like, surely it can't be that bad. But there's a lot of things out there that say the opposite.
Sure, but and then you have in the back of your head, are you going to be the example, right? Like of things gone awry, which is at one point somebody's going to be. It's it's tough because the regulations, and it's very hard to monitor everyone, especially when the objective is to scare the shit out of you. It's tough, and people are signing releases. We had it's a deleted scene from Houses 1, but this girl came out of one of the haunts we were at, and she basically said that we had this discussion about ex-felons that were in a couple haunts, and she said she'd like to know that in advance because it would make it scarier for her, and that kind of surprised me.
Even like with that stuff, like with waivers and stuff, I've seen a lot of people online that have this theory that's put there that's where they start fucking with you. A lot of this stuff is not going to happen. Like I think in Russ's waiver, he has things about needles and all this crazy shit. And a lot of people reckon he's already started the process of freaking you out. And there's so many theories about like MK Ultra and hypnosis and drugging and stuff. It's it's kind of crazy. And I guess when you watch a movie like yours, then it is kind of in the back of your mind where you're like, I wonder.
Yep. I mean, it's always there. And it quasi happened to us, when you, especially in the haunt community, because we've done so many of these movies, if you start to become recognizable, then it almost becomes this audition. And things escalate. And so it's in the back of your head.
So a lot of people that love these movies don't actually know that. So you originally made this movie as like a real documentary, was it?
Pretty much, yeah. And, we always had this twist to it. But back to our discussion about trying to get executives to understand the magnitude of these haunts in the States, it was tough. And so we couldn't get anybody to sign on the dotted line because at that time they did want everything and anything that was supernatural, paranormal. And without that, nobody had any desire to make a grounded version of found footage that, our biggest goal was to make this as real as possible. And, we kind of look at things like Blair Witch, which is always fake from frame one, which they nailed what they needed to do in 99. But we said, well, we want to take a different approach where we make everything real and pepper in what we need to for our story. Because to me, that was the only way. I try to look at it, work backwards. How would I fool myself? And I wanted to say, well, if I can fact check these things, these are real places. That's a real haunt owner. Well, the facts start to align why wouldn't I think everything I'm watching is true? And so that was how we took the approach to be a tad different, at least at the time.
And that original movie that you guys shot, you weren't looking for, was the story you were looking for dead bodies in haunts? Well,
so the idea, we always use the saying, when the tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound. And we always equated that to, have you ever seen a dead body in a haunted house? Because we thought that was a fun question because nobody can ever truly answer that. Especially when you start to find out that they sell scents, like smells that make it or make it smell like a corpse. We've heard stories, people using roadkill, stuff like that. So our mind started wandering, going, well, there is a world where you could sit there. Sound messed up to say, but if you were to if a corpse costs less than a lot of these animatronics, so what if that happened? And that was kind of our mission throughout that. Still, the blue skeleton is a big part of part 0 or part 1A, whatever you want to call it.
And when you originally shot that first one, like, did anything crazy happen, or?
The only thing crazy that's happened is the following of people wanting to join the blue skeleton, which I thought that was strange because we thought we painted them in a very demented light, but people seem to be very intrigued by them. And people asking to join and wanting to know if it's real. And so I think the bait that was taken in part 0 was great. It showed us the power of that medium, that you can get people to actually believe what they're seeing is real. And in all honesty, most of it was, we were just still steering you. We're trying to conduct you in a story that felt as real as possible. So hopefully that we pulled off our objective.
Yeah, and I had a conversation maybe 6 months ago with Eduardo Sanchez, and a lot of people kind of thought similar to what you're saying, and I wouldn't compare Blair Witch to Houses, but I think after kind of the Blair Witch in 99, a lot of people felt like, that it worked perfect for the time. Nothing like this can ever be pulled off again because of the invention of the internet, and there's no way to do anything like that again. And I feel like for the story and the I guess the industry you guys were focusing on, like, it was extremely well done to be able to pull that off in the 2000s. And like, even still, I had so many people message me and ask me about Blue Skeleton, and that's something I wanted to get into. Like, where did that come from, or what's the kind of the story behind the Blue Skeleton thing?
We were trying to figure out a name of a place where you could swear maybe you've heard of it before, right? So something as generic as the Blue Skeleton, right? And if you notice in many of these interviews, people admit to hearing about them, and so that was the intention, was that they could be out there. Maybe you've heard whispers. And because it wasn't far-fetched to us at all about using some kind of traveling haunt or something off the grid where it became an urban legend. That's what the intention was, at least, is to create something out there that wasn't on websites, and it was the antithesis of Universal Horror Nights. That was the idea.
And so that was something that was there from the start, was it? Like, you had that idea kind of in the back of your mind when you went into this originally? And so from there then, so you guys make part 0, as you call it. And what happens from there? Do you shop it out?
We started entering it into festivals, and then we got asked to open for Eli Roth, who was he was getting the Horror Director of the Decade Award at Shockfest in Los Angeles. And they asked us to open for him, and he was going to play the 10-year anniversary of Cabin Fever. And so we said, oh, that'd be great. And so we kind of got that honor, which was cool because nobody knew us, nobody knew the movie. And so there was 400 people in a sold-out theater just there for Eli, but it was a double feature. So they were there for him to speak. But what was nice is we got to pack the house and had people, because it's a very slow burn on purpose. But by the time you got to the end, you could hear a pin drop in all the good ways. And I knew that we had them. And so yeah. I grabbed the festival director and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, man, but I'm canceling the Q&A." And he kind of was pissed at first. And I said, "Look, trust me, it's better because, there was this feel that maybe people were watching something snuff-like, or they didn't understand what was happening." And so I told him, just trust me, we're going to cancel the Q&A. We flicked the lights off at the end. Zach and I disappeared up in the projector room. And everybody was given a glow stick on their way out, had to find their way out of the theater in the dark. And so that worked really well. And there was a couple girls crying, and that was fun. I really wanted to do the Q&A, but it just didn't seem to make sense in the moment. But what was neat is we won the grand prize as well for that. So it started to get a little bit of buzz that way. And then a couple weeks later, Steven Schneider, who did Paranormal Activity, gave Zach a call late one night and just said, "I just saw something." He goes, "that it's real until it's not. And I don't know when it changes, but I want to be part of it." And so it kind of all started from there.
And so from that point, then you basically had to reshoot the entire thing, was it?
Pretty much. Yeah. Because we didn't have, we ran it on credit cards because nobody understood what we were trying to do without the ghosts. So, we did it ourselves. So our sound wasn't great. And then, I'll take personal responsibility in this, but I shot it in SD on purpose because we were right at the cusp of HD. And at the time, there was only one channel called HD Net. I think Mark Cuban owned it at the time. And you would literally watch. I remember this guy was like a cliff diver, and you just watch that because it looked so crisp and clean. And it was one of the coolest things you ever seen. That being said, when anybody was interviewed or if I was trying to pull off what we were trying to pull off, it was so clean and crisp, it felt fake at the time. Mm-hmm. So I made the decision, we're going to stick with SD, because think about Blair Witch. If Blair Witch was in HD, right at the cusp, you might not have taken that debate the way we all did. So I shot it in SD, which is not going to work come 2012-13 in the theaters. And at that time, it was supposed to have a big theatrical run. And so we had to, if you were going to blow up that SD, it wouldn't work anymore. So we had to redo it in HD.
You were fine with that decision? Like you thought that was the right move?
Yes and no. I personally love the first one we did. I think that hits the mark of what we were trying to do better than any of them. But it doesn't look as pretty. It's not as polished. But the rawness to it, what I think, is what sells it. But from a mass audience perspective, and I think we have a real ADD problem. People cannot pay attention to, especially slow burns. Those are always tough in today's society, especially if somebody has a phone in their pocket. So, they might have been right for the masses on that, but I'm still very proud of it, even though it's in its rawest form.
And was there much, story-wise or whatever, is there much of a difference from the original to the remake?
Not a ton. A lot more interviews, a lot more doc feel. I think that our characters are fleshed out. The only difference is Zach and I flopped characters in the one that you probably are, or the people saw the mainstream version. We flopped characters from part 0 to part 1. Other than that, most of it parallels a lot. There's a different ending. But yeah, I mean, it's close. It was the same objective. Put it this way. It was so close. Our wardrobe's the same in the one that you guys have all seen, because we were going to pepper in both of them and make a hybrid. It was just that the SD caused too many problems.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a couple of questions about that. Like, was there anything that maybe you wanted to put in the remake or added in there that they didn't?
Yeah, it was actually a fight to put the interviews in, which I thought was some of the best material because it helped sell the whole thing. And they wanted, in the beginning, didn't want anything to do with that interview process because they thought it took people out of a quote unquote movie. And I was trying to say, well, that's not what we're making. We're not making a movie for everybody to just enjoy with their popcorn. I need you to understand the world. I need you to be part of this world and believe every single thing you're seeing is real. Otherwise, to me, you're not able to pull off, call it the trick.
Yeah. And so when you made part 0, was the intention to make multiple movies, or did that only come after you remade the...
No, it was always, we had mapped out movies. We mapped out 4 actually. And cause I think you can go on and tell many different stories with it. And I think it's funny because I think 2 is very divisive, but if we wanted to do just the normal slasher version of it, to me, that's the easier version. I prefer maybe the trick over the treat with this. That's the objective of Halloween. How it escalates, what we have designed for part 3, I think it really takes a corner. But there's such a world out there of haunts that, if anything, for people, and especially in different countries that don't get to experience a lot of these crazy haunts, hopefully we're a window for them on Halloween just from that standpoint. So I think that there's a lot out there to still explore in the haunt community. And I love the haunt community has been so great to us. They're like a family. And so that is just it's kind of fun to put them on a pedestal and display for everybody to see how much hard work is paid off through all this.
Yeah. And I do definitely, obviously, I don't know if you feel that, but I definitely agree, and there's a couple of things I want to read out to you in a bit that people emailed in to me and stuff. I definitely do feel like that this is definitely a classic. It's going to stand the test of time, like something like a Blair Witch or whatever. Not to compare it, but what that done for its own thing, I think that these movies are going to kind of stand up there as well. And it definitely gives across that Halloween feel, that haunt feel, and that sense of like, this is what it's kind of all about for a lot of people. There's so many people out there who are interested in this, and it's definitely a gateway on this side of the pond for people to kind of have a look into. Obviously, I know, it's a fictional story, but it's kind of like you said, it's a gateway into that whole industry and that community.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. I enjoyed, we were invited to come over to London and speak to a lot of the UK haunt owners. So that was great for Zach and I, and we really enjoyed it. Everybody was so nice, and it was cool to see how the haunts were treated over there differently. Especially what blew our mind is many of them are open in April, and in the States it's just an October thing, sometimes September. So stuff like that was really educational, and I loved doing that. That was a lot of fun.
Have just on the topic of that, has anything from the movies been made into a haunt?
From
anything that you guys have created, like anything to do with Blue Skeleton?
Well, so it's funny. We see a lot of people contact us when they see the character Porcelain. We noticed that a lot in haunts. We were contacted a couple years ago about doing a Blue Skeleton haunt, which I'd really like to do. I think that would be a lot of fun. We've just been, it's such a busy time of year for us to kind of dig into that. But it is something that we'd love to explore in the future. If it's something people would like to go see.
Yeah, I got so many questions asking, had you guys either done that, or has anybody reached out to you about the possibility of doing it?
Yeah, we have. We've been approached actually twice about that, and it is something we really like to explore. I just would want to make sure it was done right. Yeah,
of course. Okay, so you guys remake the original, and does it blow up straight away, or when it first released, was it a slow burn?
Well, it started, I think when it hit Netflix, from a global standpoint, that's where we really started to see it catch fire, because both movies, they're so divisive for some reason, which I'm somewhat unsure of, but I guess it's better to be divisive than it is run of the mill. But because I think a lot of people, at least from a horror perspective, wanted heads to roll. And we weren't making a slasher. That was not what this was. And sometimes when you have a certain expectation in your head, when you walk into it, then instead part one could be boring to you because there just needs to be a lot of setup for it to work. And honestly, I had blood removed. There was some CG blood that was the studio put in at one point, and I had it removed because I said the second we see blood here, I think we lose our audience, because our group, our group in the RV would go home. It's very tough to walk that line where nothing. That's why we even included the line Zach says is nothing actually happens. Nothing actually has happened to us. Like, everybody chill out when we're going to Bourbon Street, because if you don't do that and talk for the audience, they might go, oh, this is ridiculous. It's the same found footage trope that everybody has is, why don't they put down the camera and leave? Why do they keep filming? So we kind of tried to explore some of that. We cut the camera off on you a couple times because that felt more realistic. So trying to follow reality rules is tough telling a horror story. So I don't blame some people that wanted something else with that, but that just wasn't our objective. So there's nothing I can really do.
And it was only until recently, I've watched these movies so many times over the last couple of years, but only recently when I started to kind of dig into other people's opinions and stuff of them, that I started to realize that there was people out there who had that complaint where they found it maybe too slow or, oh, nothing happens for the first, hour of the movie or whatever. And I personally, and I know the majority feels the same, that I thought it was done so well that I didn't actually realize until several viewings of the movie that nobody's actually, we're not seeing people being stabbed to death and killed and stuff. I was so engrossed in the characters and the story of what was going on. I didn't even really feel like I was watching a movie in a way.
Yeah, I hope so. That's good to hear.
So things go well with that. Does the sequel get greenlit then immediately or?
Yes. Yeah. And, well, I guess, after the release, we ended up winning Sitges, which was really a cool honor for a genre film. And then with the Steam kind of picking up, I think DVDs did pretty well at the time because people were still buying DVDs. And then they approached us about doing part 2. So we were excited because we already had what we wanted to do mapped out.
Yeah. So you had that, the blueprint basically ready to go.
Correct. Yes.
And okay. So from there then, did you start filming nearly immediately or?
We actually filmed over 2 Halloweens. So we filmed a lot of, the Minnesota zombie, the zombie crawl. So it's the biggest zombie crawl in the world. Mm-hmm. We knew that we really wanted to shoot around something that extravagant, because we were trying to up the feel of part 2 and give you, we definitely didn't want to go through 5 different haunted houses again, the standard ones, because even as amazing as some of them are, they start to blend together. You're in the dark a lot. We tried to figure out what's the best way to explore Halloween from just a different angle. And some of these events are incredible. The zombie run and the zombie pub crawl were some of the coolest things I've ever done. They're awesome. And I just wanted to at least show people, even if you can't visit and can't participate, it's pretty cool to know that it exists and hopefully vicariously can experience some of that Halloween flavor with us.
Then we get into part 2. There was a lot of people who I had seen that were not unhappy or didn't like it, but with the way things took a turn in part 2, I see people kind of, I guess it kind of ties back to what you said about being disappointed about what actually ends up happening in number 1.
Sure.
Is that something did you, because in a way I felt like that was that was a purposeful thing where you didn't want to be just run of the mill and just do the same thing. It's like a slasher movie set in a haunted house or whatever. And I personally thought that's why I think I appreciate the movie so much more, because it's not that's kind of what I wanted. That's kind of my payoff, is the fact that it's oh shit, it's not all right. Okay. That makes this interesting. And now we get to go on and see, okay, how do we get back here? And that's really not what I thought it was. If you would have asked me, the conclusion to that first movie, honestly, not in a million years would I have told you that that's what it was.
And that's good. We want you to think that, because there's nothing more I hate than being in a pitch meeting and somebody asking me, what movie is this like? And I just want to go, then I wouldn't be pitching it. I just have no interest in completely rehashing something that's already been done. And so, I don't know if we need to give like a spoiler alert for part 2. If you haven't seen it, you can turn it off. But, having the blue skeleton just be murderers or whatever. How about I just like the idea that they are the most diabolical planners of all time, like for haunted houses. I try to say, okay, if Zach and Bobby have been through 100 haunts through this journey the past decade, how are you going to scare us? Well, thinking that you killed your friend or responsible for your friend, or your friend thought you were killed in front of their eyes, like that's the only thing to me that it is scary. A lot of these jump scares and other things like it just you go numb after a while. So what is the best way to do that? Well, the double cross. I mean, to me, having the blue skeleton basically trick both sides of us into scaring, might even be the wrong word, but just fucking our heads up is their objective. And so, it's easy to make heads roll, like I said. So if they had a more, their Halloween plan was just not what we expected, was what I wanted it to be. I just wanted it to be a trick, not the treat. And that's what Halloween's about. So, I hope that a lot of people understand that. And for the people that are disappointed and want it to be more of a horror movie, well, cool. Check out like Haunt. They did a good job of making the slasher version of a haunted house. That's just a different angle to take, that we were completely going in a different direction.
Yeah. And I think sometimes as well, people passively make statements like that. And you don't really sit back and think, okay, so like you said earlier, the first time we see blood, or let's say one of the characters gets killed, then that's it. The movie's over. Like there is no, there's no reason to continue. There's no reason to. I've even seen that argument with other found footage movies where, something will happen or whatever, and they try and explain it away, but it doesn't really, this makes sense. And like you said, like with the line with Zach where he says, well, nothing's actually happened to us here, so I don't see why we're not continuing. And that's, like you said, it's exactly then kind of how I would feel, and it draws you back in, and it explains itself exactly how it would in real life, really.
Right. And the anagram through houses too, I found it somewhat amusing that nobody really figured that out going through it, and I was happy about it. But we wanted to do what we wanted to tell you is straight up, the blue skeleton is also manipulating this from frame 1 again. And we didn't see it coming, and most of the audience didn't rearrange the letters in any form. And it's just, the idea that they call them agents or whatever in their society, working at different haunts all over the country, to me is a really entertaining idea to kind of explore and think about. If they had these people, these plants everywhere, that's really interesting, because I think some of the mole work that haunted houses use is incredible. They'll put people in line that are part of the act, but they really, really dupe you in with that. If you just talk to them in line and then all of a sudden they're in the scene in the movie or in the walkthrough, it's super cool. And I think that's smart. And we kind of tried to do our version of that.
Was the sequel, was that made exactly how you envisioned it? Like, did the studio have any input or want to change anything about it?
There's one sequence that I wanted to pepper throughout that we didn't get to shoot. I don't really want to bring it up because I might be able to do it again. I was a little disappointed we weren't able to do that. I think my biggest regret of 2 is when Brandy watches the film on the dirty cement wall of Hellbent. That bothered me because we were rushed. It was the last shot of the night, and it's not very visible. And I would have cut to the actual footage, which I think is really cool because my character is explaining using a model of all of Hellbent, how we're going to pull this off, and we spent a lot of time with that. And the reason I didn't put it in the movie that way is because it felt like I was going to break a found footage rule by showing a clip. And I think in retrospect, because, we show that it's on YouTube and whatever, like that could have been added. I think people could have been fine with that conceit and seen it cleaner. I think that's a major regret of mine on that, but it is what it is. It's a deleted scene on the Blu-ray, so you can see it clean if you want, which I think it helps bring everything together well if you can see it in all its details. So I wish I would have changed that, and maybe one day I'll do that version.
I actually recently seen that it was at BrokeHorrorFan.com done a VHS of the first movie. Oh yeah, that was cool. That was kind of a dream true to hit VHS. That's super cool. And just on the topic of the Blu-rays, I had quite a few people on Instagram message me about now I know you probably don't have any information, but I said I would ask this question anyway. A lot of people seem to be having a difficult time getting the movies on Blu-ray, and especially getting the original documentary is a special feature on the first Blu-ray, right? Yeah, so a lot of people reached out to me and said that they had picked up other copies. Now, is that only on the Blu-ray version? That's correct. Only on the Blu-ray, and as far as I know, only on the US. I think it's Houses of Halloween in the UK. I don't think they have it, so I think you have to have the US version. Yeah, I assume that because I had a couple of people reach out to me, and let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah, because there's several different names. Like I have one Halloween Night. There's one Blue Skeleton. Again, I don't know if these if people are picking these up or where they're picking them up, but I had a couple of people ask me about that documentary and said that they didn't get it on their copy and they're having a hard time. So for anybody who's listening, it's the US Blu-ray copies is what you're looking for, which I know are out of print now and super hard to get, but just to kind of clear that up. Yep, absolutely.
Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.